Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, July 22nd, 2022. John W. Childs is chairman of J.W. Childs Associates, LP, a private equity and special situations investment firm founded in 1995 and currently focusing on life science, real estate, and consumer brands investments. Previously, John was senior managing director of the Thomas H. Lee Company from 1987 to 1995, where he had broad responsibilities for originating, analyzing, negotiating, and managing leveraged buyout transactions such as Snapple and General Nutrition Company. Prior to that, Mr. Childs held various executive positions in the investment area at the Prudential Insurance Company of America, ultimately serving as senior managing director in charge of the Capital Markets Group. He is currently a director of Realm LCC, a private Napa wine company, Biohaven Pharmaceuticals, Pyramid Biosciences, Omax Health, Veradermics, and Basin Holdings. Prior to their sale, he was chairman of the board of Costa Brown, Sunny Delight, and CHG Healthcare Services. John is also on the board of Delta Waterfowl Research Foundation, and the Wild Salmon Center, focusing on wildlife conservation. Mr. Childs has a BA from Yale University and an MBA from Columbia University. Now, as you might imagine, John is a very wealthy man. He once told me he would likely pay far less in federal taxes under the present income tax system, but he believes that the fair tax would be better for his children, his grandchildren, and the country in general. He wrote this article that appeared in the April 29, 2022 issue of the New York Sun, and has given us permission to reprint it here. How do you spell relief? Try SALESTAX. Let Walmart and Amazon be the tax collectors. Odds are they will be vastly more efficient than the IRS, which at this point can't even return the phone calls of bewildered taxpayers. Remember the age-old question about whether a million monkeys typing for 1,000,000 years would recreate a Shakespearean play? Well, that question is unanswered, but the monkeys have succeeded in producing the United States tax code. Actually, given the mindless impenetrability of the 80,000 plus pages of tax code and accompanying regulations, it's insulting to our simian forebears to associate them with it. And now, President Biden wants to double down on this system by hiring more monkeys to expand and enforce the code. Following the example of Lois Lerner, enforcement will be selective. Now, isn't that, though, the democratic way? Before embarking on this exercise in national masochism, let's examine the cost and benefits buried in the 80,000 pages of our current tax instruction manual. A few years ago, I commissioned Art Laffer to do a study on the cost of compliance with the American tax code. The instructions were to ignore any economic theory about investment distortion or misaligned economic incentives, as important as those might be, and just focus on the quantifiable out-of-pocket costs of compliance with the tax code. Answers like, how much do we pay H&R Block? How much of our valuable time do we devote to annual compliance? And give me just the facts. The answer was an astonishing $420 billion. And remember, this was several inflationary years ago. Additional code complexities and intervening inflation have undoubtedly driven that number up. By Congress's own admission, this complex, inefficient system fails to collect some $500 billion a year in various forms of non-compliance, and this is what Mr. Biden's reinforcements are designed to address. Bear in mind, too, that this non-compliance number ignores the underground economy, drug dealers, cyber fraudsters, and millions of ordinary Americans whose untaxed economic activity is estimated in hundreds of billions of dollars. There is a better way. Replace the entire income tax monstrosity with a national consumption tax, i.e. a national sales tax. Let Walmart and Amazon be the tax collectors. Odds are they'll be vastly more efficient than the IRS, which at this point can't even return the phone calls of bewildered taxpayers. All retailers already perform sales tax collection services for state governments, so it's hardly a leap of faith to ask them to do it for the feds. One of the nice features of a national sales tax is that everybody gets to pay it. When the corner drug dealer goes to Walmart, he pays his taxes. This would be bad news for tax lawyers and accountants. Some of the brightest minds in the country now devote themselves to crafting fiendishly clever tax avoidance schemes, though imagine what an unexpected dividend would flow from redirecting all of that creativity to productive activities. So, let's get this straight. Our current tax system spends about $500 billion a year in order not to collect around $1 trillion a year in non-compliance and underground activities. A consumption tax would cost virtually nothing while making sure the cheats and the crooks pay their fair share. That looks like a great $1.5 trillion trade, and that's before counting the kicker from all those Elon Musks liberated from tax preparation drudgery. Aside from the simplicity, a bizarre word for tax discussion, and efficiency of the consumption tax, it would make a tool for controlling inflation. Huh? Now, the time-honored approach to inflation is to crush demand with higher interest rates. Now, as we previously noted, this is the economic equivalent of chemotherapy. In addition to the pain of recession and unemployment, the blunt instrument of high interest rates inhibits supply creation, the other antidote to inflation, by raising the cost of capital. Like a bad drug, raising rates has a lot of off-target effects. In addition to raising the cost of capital, thus inhibiting supply growth, it increases the budget deficit. After all, who's the biggest consumer of debt capital? The United States Treasury, of course. If the cost of Treasury bonds got back to the 1970s, circa 10%, the interest cost of servicing the debt would consume, on an order of magnitude, something like 75% of all tax revenue. Now don't worry, this wouldn't crowd out other federal expenditures. It would just mean more borrowing, a vicious cycle putting greater pressure on rates. So, why are we raising rates to fight inflation? Well, to control demand, of course. As demand dries up, prices must fall. But with a tax on consumer spending, you could control demand by raising taxes instead of interest rates. This targeted attack on demand might also induce recession and unemployment, but since it doesn't involve manipulating interest rates, the economic slowdown would mean that rates would fall. The cost of capital would then be poised to fuel the next supply-side expansion. And the Treasury? It would get a twofer. Lower rates would mean less interest expense. Higher consumption taxes could mean more tax revenue. This is almost, and forgive me here, Keynesian in its elegance. You'd be controlling inflation by threatening the economy with a budget surplus, and the monkeys in Washington could take a break. In conclusion, John has reached his conclusions not based on computer models, but from his lifetime of creating successful businesses and providing employment to thousands of people. Now, we can all agree that the income payroll tax system is broken. It's no longer working. We can't repair it, but we can replace it with a fair tax. All Americans must join us before it's too late and the wonderful country we love is further harmed. Join us and take back control of our country, not with bullets, but with the elimination of one of the biggest threats to our liberty and economic prosperity, the income payroll tax. We should also remember Edmund Burke's warning that applies to our efforts to take back control. Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. We should also remember this quote from George Orwell's 1984, which, if we do nothing, may well foretell your and your children's future. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. So what can each of us do? We can write letters and make calls to our elected representatives and attend Zoom town hall meetings demanding that if they really want to allow Americans to take back control, the first step is to eliminate the income payroll tax system and enact the FAIRtax. Take back control. Help us pass the FAIRtax. The IRS will be gone and will pay our taxes when we make purchases. We, not the ruling class and their minions in D.C., will decide how much federal tax we pay. And we'll know how much tax we're paying because taxes will no longer be hidden from us. They'll be clearly shown on every retail receipt. If you have friends who don't know about the FAIRtax, send them to FAIRtax.org. Have them watch the whiteboards under how it works, and if they agree, ask them to please join us. Then, contact your members of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the FAIRtax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.